I broke through the bullying parents' plot to silence, was bullied by the girls' revenge almost swallowed me. Evan forced me to live together, but also told me that the lost soul broken into 7 pieces to find a way to save my life. As the room temperature plummeted, I couldn't help but shiver. A wave of intense unease washed over me. Didn't Hugo say Evan was never at Return Manor from the 15th to the 18th of every month? It's only been 2 days. How could he be back already? Then I glanced again at Evan's gloomy face, as if someone had murdered his entire family and stolen everything he owned. His aura was so oppressive it was downright frightening. What are you guys talking about? Evan's dark eyes were like a bottomless, icy pool. When his gaze fell on me, the sheer weight of it almost left me breathless. Hugo and I broke into a cold sweat in an instant. But Hugo was quick on his feet. He shot up from his seat, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and, in a moment of panic, blurted out, "I just remembered the herbs drying in the yard aren't yet collected. You guys keep chatting. I'll go take care of that." Before the words had even left my mouth, Hugo instantly transformed into a snow-white little fox and darted out the door in a flash, leaving me alone to face Evan, who was radiating an intense aura right there at the doorway. You're back?" I awkwardly tugged at the corner of my mouth, trying to force a harmless smile. I wasn't sure whether Evan had overheard my conversation with Hugo just now. Before Hugo could even explain why he'd stopped me from mentioning Lucas, Evan had already returned, leaving me with a growing sense of unease. Evan nodded grimly, his thin lips devoid of color, clearly not in good shape. He stared straight at me, his voice laced with an unmistakable, commanding pressure. "You still haven't answered me? What were you talking about just now with that little fox?" My heart was pounding wildly, and I found myself torn between telling the truth or keeping it all hidden. "Speak," Evan said in a low, chilling voice that echoed like a thunderclap. I jumped at the sound, trembling with fear. In his presence, I'd always feel like a startled rabbit. His innate, king-like aura of fierce authority was simply too intimidating. Remembering Hugo's warning, I decided to keep Lucas's involvement a secret for now, telling him only about meeting Chloe, being possessed by Mia, and riding that eerie bus. Throughout my entire account, Evan listened with a furrowed brow, and a flicker of complex emotion passed briefly through his eyes. Then he asked, "So how did you end up getting back exactly?" "It was pure luck. I ran into a kind stranger who helped me out," I replied, doing my best to keep my tone calm and natural. "What kind stranger?" His voice grew even deeper, tinged with an almost imperceptible sharpness. My heart gave a sudden jolt, and I mustered up the courage to reply, "Just a stranger I didn't know, someone who happened to be passing by." And it was the truth. Before I'd met Lucas on the bus, we really had never laid eyes on each other. As for what he'd said about some kind of familial mediumship pact, I still had no clue what he was talking about. Evan didn't press any further. Instead, he took a step closer toward me. His figure was tall and imposing, and when he stood in front of me, he seemed almost to tower over me entirely. I felt as tiny and insignificant as a little chick caught in the gaze of an eagle. "Lila," he said. "Here." I instinctively straightened my posture. Evan's face remained cold as he suddenly reached behind me and tugged gently on something, a thin, silvery white thread that he pulled free. "What's this?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I froze. This thread looked strangely familiar. It was almost exactly like the one I'd seen in the taxi last night. Back then, it had flashed briefly and then vanished, but how could it have wound itself around me? Although I'm not entirely sure, my gut instinct tells me this is most likely silk from jade, the jade-faced spider Lucas keeps. Could it be spider silk? I ventured cautiously. Evan let out a snort of laughter, his tone laced with obvious skepticism. "Oh? Maybe I just brushed against it somewhere in a corner by accident," I muttered, lowering my gaze to stare at the tips of my shoes, too afraid to meet his eyes directly. "How on earth did spider silk end up on you? Besides jade silk, whose else could it possibly be? Could it be that Evan and Lucas have some sort of falling out? Otherwise, why would Hugo specifically warn me not to mention Lucas at all? But judging by the way Evan seems to see right through everything, I doubt I'll be able to pull one over on him. Just when I was lost in thought, a sudden sharp pain shot through my chin. Evan's slender fingers had pinched my chin, forcing me to look up at him. He seemed to enjoy using this method to grab my attention, and I couldn't help but frown. Ow, I protested softly. Ow? Evan sighed lightly, releasing his grip with a hint of exasperation in his voice. You wimp. The pinch had nearly brought tears to my eyes, and I rubbed my chin indignantly. His grip really was quite rough. Suddenly, Evan leaned down and scooped me up sideways, then headed straight for his room. This time, he didn't roughly toss me onto the bed. Instead, he set me down gently. Although his expression remained grim, the hostility radiating from him had noticeably subsided. He crouched down, carefully cradling my feet in his hands, his brow furrowing even deeper. Are you an idiot? Your foot's hurt and you didn't even notice? Huh? I'm hurt? I'd been completely oblivious until he mentioned it. Only then did I start to feel a faint, prickling pain around my ankle. I glanced down and saw a wound on my ankle, neither deep nor shallow, with tiny streaks of blood seeping out. Before I could even think about pulling my foot away, Evan slapped the top of my foot hard with his palm. Don't move, he said firmly. What are you doing? I mumbled quietly, feeling utterly embarrassed under his intense gaze on my foot. Evan raised his eyes and gave me a sidelong glance, a sly smile curling at the corner of his lips. Which part of your body haven't I seen or touched yet? Why are you suddenly shy? His words made my face flush all the way up to my ears in an instant. Just thinking back to the 2 previous times we'd slept together, those wild moments, the memories were just too embarrassing to even mention. Without warning, Evan pulled out a clean handkerchief from somewhere and carefully wiped away the blood around my wound. Then he took out a tube of ointment and evenly applied it to the wound. The cool touch instantly eased the pain, and the comfort was so soothing that I couldn't help but squint my eyes slightly. Be more careful next time. Evan paused briefly, his tone laced with an unmistakable possessiveness. Remember, your body doesn't just belong to you. It also belongs to me. His words left me utterly at a loss for how to respond. My relationship with Evan was just too delicate. On the surface, he seemed to accept me as his partner, yet there was always this underlying sense of distance. But right now, his concerns stirred something strange and unfamiliar in my heart. Just what exactly was his true attitude toward me? What's wrong? Unwilling to accept it? Seeing my silence, Evan tilted his lips into a mischievous grin, a grin that was both alluring and subtly cruel. I shook my head gently. No. Good, Evan said, standing up and letting out a cold snort. You may not be good enough for me, but you'd better be completely mine. If you dare betray me. His gaze suddenly turned icy cold, and the harshness in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. Your family, and everyone else you care about, will all go down with you. I was instantly struck pale with fear. As expected, I shouldn't have been fooled by Evan's gentle exterior. Deep down, he was an utterly ruthless person. After all, he could crush someone's skull with a single kick without even batting an eyelid. Got it? I quickly nodded vigorously, as if pounding garlic. Got it! I'd never, ever betray you. He reached out and gently stroked my head, his tone soft and soothing, like he was comforting a kitten or puppy. You're such a good girl. I thought he'd be done once he'd applied the medicine, but unexpectedly, he pulled out a bandage and began wrapping it around my ankle again and again, until finally my foot had transformed into a round, plump, big steamed bun. Then you'll be all better by tomorrow morning, Evan said, looking with satisfaction at his masterpiece. I really wasn't used to being alone in a room with Evan. His presence was just too overwhelming, making me feel utterly uncomfortable. Thanks. If there's nothing else, I'll head back to my room now. I struggled to stand up, hopping on one foot as I tried to make my way out. But just as I'd taken 2 steps, Evan suddenly grabbed me and pulled me back onto the bed. Where do you think you're going? He asked, holding me tightly against him, his chin resting lightly in the hollow of my neck, his voice tinged with a barely suppressed hint of anger. My body instantly went stiff, as rigid as a piece of wood, and I quickly replied, I'm going back to my room. Your room's right here, isn't it? Evan's voice carried a clear note of dissatisfaction. I froze. What exactly did he mean by that? Just as I was about to struggle, Evan's arms wrapped tightly around me, almost as if he were afraid I'd run away. No need to worry. With him here, even if I had 100 brave hearts, I still wouldn't dare to bolt. I couldn't help but tug at the corner of my mouth and tentatively asked, I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean. Evan frowned unhappily. Is what I said really that hard to grasp? Lila, I'm being perfectly clear. I'm telling you right now, my room is your room. Starting today, you're living with me. Oh my goodness. Evan's words sent a shiver through my entire body. Was he seriously suggesting we start living together officially? I was so shocked that my tongue felt tied in knots. This isn't really a good idea, is it? I'm still young. I'm not really ready for something like this. Before I could finish my sentence, Evan's gaze swept over me, lingering briefly on my chest before he said with a teasing tone, You're not exactly a kid anymore. My face instantly turned scarlet. How could Evan stare straight at my chest and say something so flippant? You were the one who called me flippant just a moment ago. Aren't you just as bad yourself? I glared at him, pouting fiercely. Evan let out a low chuckle and took a deep breath near my neck, his tone teasing as he said, How am I supposed to be flippant? You're not exactly a kid anymore. Soon you'll be 20. Go back a few hundred years, and it was perfectly common for girls as young as 13 or 14 to get married. By your age, in those days, you'd have been considered an old maid already. Ouch. That hit home. I clutched my chest, feeling deeply offended. After all, I still have more than half a year before I turn 20. How could I possibly be an old maid when I'm in the prime of my youth? In the end, Evan reached an undeniable conclusion. So, you're definitely not a kid anymore. He gave me a somber glance and added, It's getting late. Time to get some rest. Although I'd shared the bed with Evan twice before, this time the atmosphere was completely different. Sitting on his bed, I felt utterly uncomfortable all over. Evan was the first to lie down. The red silk robe he wore had an eerie, otherworldly beauty. I stole a quick peek, and then quickly looked away again. Why on earth did this big guy have such a fondness for red? What are you still standing there for? Do you want me to push you down? Evan urged impatiently. Before he could even make a move, I hurriedly lay down beside him, keeping a good 2-foot distance between us. Good night, I said, then pulled the blanket over my head, eager to escape this awkward situation as soon as possible. After the harrowing events of the previous night, I was truly exhausted. Not long after lying down, I fell fast asleep, dreaming nothing at all that night. The next morning, I was dazed for a couple of seconds before realizing that the sun outside my window had already climbed high into the midday sky. The spot beside me was already empty. Apparently, Evan had gotten up long ago. I quickly scrambled out of bed and got myself together. I still had to head to Cloud City University for class. My ankle, which had been wrapped up like a steamed bun last night, was completely healed. The bandage had been removed sometime during the night, and the wound had healed without a trace. It didn't hurt at all anymore. Just as I'd finished putting on my clothes, Evan pushed the door open. Seeing that I was awake, he said straight away, I've already arranged a leave of absence for you at Cloud City University. You don't have to go to school anymore. A leave of absence? I stared at him in shock, my eyes wide with astonishment. Why would you arrange a leave of absence for me? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Evan glanced at me, his tone flat and unemotional. Your life was hanging by a thread. How could you still care about school? His words felt like a bucket of cold water dousing me awake. I'd almost forgotten my own predicament. The bravado that had just surged within me instantly wilted, drooping like an eggplant struck by frost. Seeing my spirit sink, Evan went on to say, I've looked into it. You lost one soul fragment, and it's broken into 7 pieces. You'll only be truly safe once you've found all 7 fragments, reassembled them into a complete soul, and returned them to your body. Evan's words sent a chill straight through my heart. Losing just one soul fragment was bad enough, but now it had shattered into 7 pieces, scattered across some unknown location. Just thinking about it made me feel utterly hopeless. So right now you have 2 choices. Either travel with me, searching high and low for those soul fragments, or stay behind in Cloud City and fend for yourself. How could I possibly choose to just let myself die? My parents poured so much xinxue into keeping me alive. What would they do if I just gave up and died like this? I've got no choice, I said firmly to Evan. I'm choosing to join you in searching for the soul fragments. Evan nodded. Now that's a wise decision. I stared at him, lost in thought. This man had an unpredictable temper, making it utterly impossible to guess what he was thinking, and his attitude toward me was especially strange. On one hand, he claimed to care about me. On the other, he'd sometimes treat me with utter disdain. What a peculiar fellow he was. Evan raised an eyebrow, his tone tinged with a hint of self-admiration. What are you staring at? Have I enchanted you with my beauty? No. I quickly shook my head, then asked curiously, I'm just wondering, Lord Dragon King, why did you suddenly decide to take me along on this quest to find the soul fragments? Why? Evan's voice suddenly grew low and tinged with clear annoyance. Because I've got nothing better to do. Got it? I awkwardly rubbed the tip of my nose and said, Sure, of course I get it. You can take a little more rest. We've got something important to do tonight. Evan changed the subject. What kind of important thing? I pressed him further. Evan's expression turned serious, and he uttered 2 words. Chloe. My eyes instantly lit up, and I stared at him eagerly. You're going to come with me to look for Chloe? Evan's gaze shifted away somewhat unnaturally, and his tone became sharp. I'm not going with you. Can you handle it all by yourself? Embarrassed, I scratched my head and mumbled softly. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this. I don't have much experience yet, so I'd really appreciate it if the Dragon King could give me some guidance. Evan's expression softened a bit, and he nodded modestly. Still pretty humble. Keep it up. My lips couldn't help but curl upward. Evan's little temper is actually kind of amusing. As long as he doesn't swing between moodiness and sullenness, he's actually quite easy to get along with. After finishing his task, Evan headed off to the backyard. I didn't follow him. I felt way too pressured being alone with him. When I ran into Hugo again, he'd already reverted back to his youthful, human-like form. Seeing me step out of the room, he wore a mischievous, knowing look on his weathered face. Morning, Hugo, I greeted him. Hugo mumbled in response, giving me a resentful glance. I got scolded by Evan first thing this morning. Why did he scold you? I was stunned. He blamed me for going to the trouble of preparing a room for you, Hugo said softly. Evan, isn't this a bit much? He asked me to move in. Didn't he owe it to me to at least prepare a room? As I thought about this, it suddenly dawned on me. Last night, when he said, My room is your room, could it be that he was hinting I'd end up sleeping in the same room with him from now on? And on top of that, he even scolded Hugo for this. What a deeply calculating and subtly manipulative man he is. Evan, the way you're acting makes it hard for me not to think you've got feelings for me. The thought flashed through my mind for 3 seconds before I forcefully pushed it aside. Evan's thoughts were just too hard to read. It was best to take things one step at a time from now on. The most important thing was to avoid upsetting him. Hugo, it's not your fault. Your room was so beautifully prepared. I really loved it, I quickly reassured him. Tonight, I'm determined to sleep in my own room. Sleeping with Evan just feels way too uncomfortable now. Hugo sighed and said, No matter how beautiful it is, it's all useless. Every single thing in the room has been taken away by him. Now it's just an empty shell. I hurriedly ran to the room that had been prepared for me. As soon as I pushed open the door, sure enough, it was completely empty. Just bare walls and a bare floor. All the exquisite furniture and decorations that had been there before were gone. Hugo, this. I pointed at the empty room, then turned to ask him, but right then, I bumped into a red figure. Evan was standing right behind me, watching me with an amused look. You really like all those fancy, gaudy things, huh? I nodded awkwardly. It's not flashy or over the top. It just feels really classy, which is kind of a pity. Evan didn't say a word. He turned around and walked away without even giving me a response. I confirmed to myself once again. Evan was definitely someone whose emotions swung wildly from one extreme to the other. Time flew by, and soon it was evening. Time to head out and find Chloe. I recounted to Evan the scene from last night when Chloe and I parted ways, then asked uncertainly, I've got a bold hunch. When Chloe left last night, could it be that Mia had possessed her? Judging by what you described, Evan said, it's highly likely she was possessed. Looks like that vengeful spirit with such deep resentment has no intention of letting Chloe go at all. I frowned and asked in confusion, but I clearly saw Chloe back to normal just a few days ago. How come she's suddenly possessed again? That vengeful spirit was deliberately lying low, Evan explained. Your presence that night made her feel threatened, so she temporarily subdued her malevolent energy. Later, when she realized you and Chloe weren't on good terms and spotted an opening, she started wreaking havoc all over again. I felt absolutely no sympathy for Chloe's plight. Every cause has its effect. If only she hadn't bullied Mia in middle school, Mia might still be attending school normally today instead of lying in a hospital in a vegetative state. I'd heard from Sophia earlier that Mia had always been at the top of her class, the family's greatest hope. Now, trapped in this coma, how utterly innocent she is. Now that Mia's in a vegetative state, is there any chance her soul could ever return to her body? I asked Evan. That depends on her lingering attachment, Evan replied. As long as her attachment remains, the influence it has on you won't go away. Come on, you wimp. With that, he reached out and patted my head. Don't pat my head! You'll end up getting dumber! I cringed and took a step back. Evan's hand froze mid-air, and his expression instantly turned slightly hostile. Haha, so if I don't pat you, you won't be dumb anymore? You're already so dumb from head to toe. Even your hair seems dumber than usual. Could you possibly get any dumber? I clutched my chest, feeling like I'd sooner or later burst into a bloody cough from Evan's poisonous tongue. What's with this Dragon King? Why did he have to be born with such a mouth? All right, you dummy. Time to go, Evan said, then turned around and headed for the door without even bothering to see if I was following. Of course, I wouldn't dare fall behind. I scurried after him like a little puppy. After all, getting Mia's situation sorted out could only be good for me. After all, it pays to know when to bend with the wind. With Evan by my side, I felt much more at ease, and I could totally trust him to take charge of everything. Soon enough, we arrived at Cloud City Private Hospital. Right now, Evan and I were standing outside the door of a VIP patient room. Is that Mia in there? I asked softly. Evan shook his head. It's Chloe. Just as I was about to ask why Chloe was hospitalized, a wave of familiar, overwhelming resentment surged through the door, a surge far stronger than anything I'd ever felt before. Suddenly, I felt suffocated. I clutched my chest and sank to the floor, unable even to straighten my back. My hearing seemed to become unusually sharp at that moment, so sharp that I could clearly hear the conversations coming from the hospital room. How can that family still cling to this issue? It's been so long already. Their daughter's now in a vegetative state. Do they really want to ruin our daughter's bright future too? We absolutely can't let this come to light. That was Chloe's mother's voice, filled with anger and impatience. A man's voice immediately followed, its tone cold and menacing. How ridiculous! Chloe and that lowly girl are simply not on the same level. I'll never allow some trash like that to ruin Chloe's life. The room fell into a brief silence. Soon after, Chloe's mother's voice rang out again, laced with a hint of ruthless determination. We can't let them ruin Chloe's entire life. Old Chloe, you've failed to fulfill your responsibilities as a father all these years. This is your chance to make it right. Find someone who can do the job cleanly, without leaving any lingering problems behind. Came the man's voice, so dark and menacing that just hearing it made it easy to picture his grimacing expression at that very moment. Meanwhile, the negative emotions swirling around me had reached their peak. I even began to suspect that this bitter resentment might just consume me and drive me to my death. It felt so unbearable, so hopeless, so filled with hatred. I knew all these feelings were Mia's. Her pain and anger had resonated through our souls, seeping into me like an echo. I wanted nothing more than to fling open the hospital room door and take a good look at the hideous faces of that couple inside. Just then, I suddenly found myself enveloped in a cool embrace, and a soft, icy sensation brushed against my forehead. The negative emotions that had almost swallowed me whole were instantly diluted by more than half. Finally, I can breathe again, Evan said as he let me go, frowning and studying me closely. Your ability to sense emotions has exceeded my expectations. Lila, you've really surprised me. A surprise? To me, it was nothing short of a fright. If Mia's resentment isn't put to rest, I'm afraid this emotion will haunt me for the rest of my life. I didn't respond to Evan's comment. Instead, I asked urgently, you heard everything that went on in the hospital room, right? What do they have in mind? Especially Chloe's mother's remark. Find someone who can do it cleanly, sent a chill down my spine. Could it be that they're planning to harm Mia? But Mia's already in a vegetative state. How could they possibly be so ruthless? Besides, it's Mia who's been hurt, not them. Evan gave me a half smile, half sneer. There's a saying, cut the weeds at the root, or they'll spring up again when spring breezes come. I checked. It turns out Mia's parents have already gathered some crucial evidence proving Chloe bullied Mia. But they haven't made it public yet. They've been waiting all along for Chloe to issue a public apology and admit what she's done. I paused, then shook my head. No way. Chloe would never apologize, not in a million years, let alone voluntarily admit her wrongdoing. Evan raised an eyebrow and asked with genuine curiosity, how can you be so sure? I hesitated for a moment, then said seriously, Chloe simply wouldn't realize she's wrong. In her eyes, Mia is just a tiny, insignificant ant, someone she can manipulate and bully however she pleases. I looked up at Evan and countered, if you stepped on an ant, would you go out of your way to apologize to it? Perhaps my analogy is a bit extreme, but that's simply the truth. Chloe never once treated Mia as an equal. The reason she felt guilty and panicked whenever Mia was mentioned earlier, I'd guess, was probably because Mia's spirit had been haunting her all along, even sneaking into her dreams. Footsteps echoed from inside the hospital room, steadily approaching the doorway. Evan and I were standing right outside, and we had to hurry and hide. Just as I started to sprint toward the end of the hallway, Evan grabbed me by the arm and yanked me back. His towering frame instantly pinned me against the wall outside the room, and in the blink of an eye, his face was inches away from mine. At the same moment, the hospital room door swung open. Chloe's parents stepped out, and when they saw Evan, with his back turned to them, Chloe's mother's expression subtly shifted. She muttered under her breath, today's young people are really getting bolder and bolder. They're even making out right here at the hospital room door. Don't they feel the slightest bit embarrassed? Chloe's father glanced at her briefly, then hurriedly pulled her away, saying, let's go. There's important business to attend to. Don't waste any time. As I watched their hasty figures recede into the distance, I knew for sure they were headed somewhere to hurt Mia. I wanted to run after them and stop them, but Evan grabbed my arm. He tilted his chin toward the hospital room and whispered, just go in first. But what about them? I've already had someone keeping an eye on them, Evan interrupted me. Right now, the most important thing is to deal with whatever's going on with Chloe. With that, he shoved me roughly into the room. It was a luxurious VIP ward, and Chloe was the only one inside. She lay quietly on the bed, but as we approached, her eyes, which had been tightly shut just moments before, suddenly shot open wide. Those eyes, utterly black, with no trace of white whatsoever, stared straight at both Evan and me, unblinking and piercing. To be honest, being stared at with that kind of look made my heart shiver. Judging by her appearance, the spirit inhabiting Chloe's body right now must be Mia's. She lay motionless on the bed, staring at us with those eerie eyes, her voice hoarse as she asked, "Are you here to help her?" I quickly shook my head. Chloe, the kind of person she is, simply wasn't worth my help. Ever since she'd wrongly accused me of having a relationship with Silas without any proof and threatened to make my college years miserable, My impression of her had plummeted to rock bottom. I consider myself a kind person, but I'm certainly not blindly so. We're here to help you, I said to her earnestly. Help me? For a moment, Chloe's eyes flashed with astonishment, then she gave a self-deprecating smile. Her family has power and influence. How could you possibly help me? Why would you even bother helping me? Someone else said they'd help me once, too. I pinned all my hopes on her, but in the end, she betrayed me just for a little bit of personal gain. Her voice was laced with utter despair. You simply can't understand the pain I've been through, and you can't possibly help me at all. Right now, the only thing I can do is drag Chloe down to hell with me. As soon as she finished speaking, a massive surge of dark energy suddenly erupted from Chloe's body. The dark energy writhed and twisted like monstrous claws, seeming ready to swallow the entire hospital room whole, showing every sign of wanting to take Chloe down with it. Don't do this, I cried out in panic. You're not at fault. You shouldn't go to hell with her. It's Chloe who deserves to be sent to hell. I really can help you. I'll do anything. Just tell me what your wish is, and I'll do everything in my power to make it come true. If Mia's resentment isn't put to rest, I'll keep getting haunted by this emotion forever. And besides, I genuinely want to help her. Those nightmares she experiences through empathy feel just as real to me as if I'd lived them myself. That suffocating, desperate feeling of being bullied, it's something that anyone who hasn't gone through it simply can't understand. Chloe turned her head mechanically, her eyes filled with a mournful gaze as she looked at me. A wish? I want Chloe to taste all the pain I've endured. I want her to be utterly ruined, to live forever branded as the bully. I want everyone to know, beneath her glamorous, polished exterior, she hides a heart so ugly and vicious. Why is it that she could destroy my life yet suddenly become the school beauty adored by everyone? Why does she get to have a bright future while I'm stuck lying on a cold hospital bed, never waking up again? Why? Why me? Her voice carried a heart-wrenching plea, asking not only me, but also questioning the injustice of fate. As I watched the dark aura around her grow denser and denser, her resentment threatening to consume what little sanity she had left, Evan finally stepped in. If he didn't act soon, the situation would spiral out of control.